Today, we're looking at fascia as the key to sustainable strength and how to use the paradigm shift of fascia to build strength in a way that's connected and integrated rather than separated and isolated. And this leads to strength building feeling powerful rather than effortful. Remember that fascia is a paradigm shift. You're moving from the biomechanical model to a vision of biotensegrity. So instead of seeing the body like levers and pulleys, which is coming from the musculoskeletal system, you're seeing the body as a living organism. And that's going to ask us to look at tension, force transmission, and resonance. Fascia is built for load and elasticity. Unlike muscle alone, connective tissue can rebound like a spring, and this gives you efficient movement, graceful, sustainable actions, and it's part of what makes connective tissue unique. Fascia connects everything, so strength becomes relational when you're working with the myofascial meridians. You're looking for long lines of connection and integration rather than isolated effort and specific muscle movements. That isolated effort and specific muscle movement is part of the biomechanical model, and fascia asks you to look at your body with tensegrity in mind, and that there's balanced tension across the system, and your connective tissue is what distributes force evenly across the body like a suspension bridge. If you have tight, sticky spots in your connective tissue, it's almost like a dam in the body, and your body will find a way. It will adapt. So the force will move around that sticky spot or that scar tissue or that binding, but the force transmission will not be even. And this is why we use myofascial release to spot treatment areas in the body, and then somatic release and well-tensioned movement to work out the myofascial meridians. Better force transmission equals more ease and grace, less likelihood of injury, but also more power, especially when strength building. Another way to look at this is muscles contract, fascia connects. Muscles tempt us to do repetitive, linear, isolated training that can create rigid tissue, but I also think we find it unsatisfying. There's something about the wholeness, the expansiveness of connective tissue that makes the strength training feel more complete. Fascia-based strength training also has a spring or a suppleness because fascia has elastic recoil. It's like a renewable energy source inside of your body. It's a spring-like quality you can develop through plyometrics, through dynamic stretching like the pumping, pulsing movements we do in practices, and also loaded movements. Muscle tempts us to do those isolated specific actions, but connective tissue thrives on variation. Angles, tempos, different loads. It keeps the tissue responsive and resilient. For example, one of the ways to build strength is increase time under tension, how slow you do the movement. And that is a fabulous way to build strength, especially in the beginning, so it's not just about adding more weight. Fascia is humming in the background of the yoga asana practice, especially when you add strength. The yoga tradition has an explicit intention of creating connection and wholeness inside of your body, which is really like putting you in touch with your fascia. Yoga asana wakes up your inner awareness. And remember that 80 to 90% of the nerve endings in connective tissue are interoceptive. So it's like yoga asana wakes up the awareness of your fascia. And then when you add strategic resistance, add load, add functional breathing, you have a stability and a strength that is built from the inside out. To understand fascia, we have to talk about biotensegrity. This is a structural principle applied to biological systems. It describes how tension and compression balance within the body, so no part bears the full load alone. And this is of strength training, yes, but even walking. It's a force distributed throughout your body, and we need that. In the biotensegrity model, your bones are compressive struts. They don't touch, which is wild to think about. But when you have bone on bone, it is a medical concern, and surgery is likely to be prescribed. So it's like literally our bones are floating, and the tension elements holding them are fascia and muscles. So then when you move, the entire system responds. It's not just isolated muscles. It's not levers and pulleys. It's more like a web. You can also think of the bone tension matrix as the dome of a tent, and the bones become the tent poles, and then the connective tissue muscles becomes the fabric that gets ballooned and suspended, and then the tent poles are held in that tensioned matrix. Note that this is very different than the biomechanical model, where we tend to see the skeleton as stacked like bricks and then muscles pulling like puppeteer strings. Here are some tensegrity truths. Your bones aren't stacked, they're floating in a web of fascia and muscle tension. Because your body is a tensegrity dome, not a stack of bricks with puppeteer strings, your posture is less about alignment and more about balancing the system. When your system is well balanced, you don't hold yourself up by force or willpower, you're suspended, you're held. Healthy, hydrated fascia equals resilience because there's tension across the system and there's a smooth, even force transmission. And remember that you hydrate your fascia not just by liquid, but by your breathing. Restricted fascia gets dry, desiccated, almost matted. And then it's like that dam metaphor. There's poor load distribution, poor force transmission, and that leads to compensation patterns and eventually injury. Think of a time your body got stuck or locked up. For example, you're picking something up and then there's a catch, a binding in your lower back. And this is that feeling of your back going out. There wasn't appropriate force transmission. The load wasn't distributed evenly, and then there's that dam feeling in the body, like a traffic jam. Similar is a crick in your neck. Usually it happens when you first wake up and you move or you try to stretch. And then again, not an appropriate force transmission. The action doesn't travel across the tissue. Something gets bound up, stuck, and then you're locked up. With connective tissue, power comes from balance. If something is locked up, bound up, tied up, other things compensate. The force and load won't be distributed evenly. These days I use yoga asana mostly to balance my body, to keep my webbing tensioned so that there's appropriate force and load distribution for other things I like to do, like strength training, running, hiking, and playing with the kids. When you understand connective tissue, you know that pain can show up far from the cause because the whole system transmits strain. So you may have an area of darkness, of binding, one of those little dams in one area of the body, but then the pain, the traffic jam occurs in a totally different spot. The good news is that you can work on this spot and it can release the area of strain, or it can open up different things. So just like strain is transmitted across the system, so is opening and releasing. We have a formula for practices that takes connective tissue into consideration, and it goes like this: roll, release, activate, flow, play. We start with rolling, some type of myofascial release to spot treat areas in the body. And the myofascial release that we do may be specific to the practice. For example, the inner thigh release practice, we roll the inner thighs. When I'm practicing on my own, I often do my outer hips because that's where I feel the most tension and binding in my body. Next is release. This is somatic release to calibrate the nervous system to get you in an open, receptive place inside, but also to release any stress or strain you may have accumulated through your day. It also gives us more opportunity to repattern, reprogram the body. These somatic releasing movements are slow, gentle, done supine, and they also start to open up long myofascial lines. Next, we activate. This is the deep core activation through functional breathing, and we also do some work for pelvis stabilizing, either strengthening hamstrings or outer hip muscles like glute med, glute men. Next is flow. We start moving and breathing, using the activation we've created, exploring the opening we've generated with the rolling and releasing. We learn in layers and add complexity and challenge intelligently. So this may be a progressive Surya Namaskar series or adding weights progressively. And then finally, we play. There's some type of pose or flow or challenge or movement exercise where we clearly experience the connection developed during practice. You can use this template to build your own practices so that you're taking connective tissue into account, you're releasing the issues in your tissues, and building new patterns of moving and breathing. When we add strength to our practices, we're doing that through a movement science lens. So we do progressive load, not just with weights, but with gravity. We start laying down because then you can repattern, retrain the body and get out of compensating patterns. Then we progress onto strength building on hands and knees, then standing, both legs in the same plane, eventually split legs like a lunge, and then finally single leg balancing poses. With strength, we focus on the functional four, the four things you want to be able to do to age well: squat, lunge, pull, which is a rowing action, and then push. After we do some strength building, we experiment, explore, and then test. We use common poses, movements we know and love, to see how the strength training has impacted our bodies. One of the things that's been most exciting is students often feel things differently. Alignment principles or points of connection that have been elusive become obvious because of the load, because of the weight, because of the activation in muscles, but also the myofascial meridians. If you'd like to explore practice with us, check out the 20-Minute Miracles app. If you want to do yoga-inspired, science-backed strength training, check out Asana Strong.